Buddy, David McCoy, Ochimo Properties, Real Estate Matters. So we are continuing our series on frequently asked questions of commercial real estate, and I'm continuing especially this a few questions specifically for landlords. And so one question I will get from landlords sometimes is, okay, so we're getting showings, so why aren't we getting any offers or letters of intent? Why is it not going any further? I think like everything else, it can be a number of things. We have to think about the overall market. We have to think about maybe this particular submarket, and we have to think about this particular property. Right now, in our market, I'm in the Louisville, Kentucky area. The demand for, say, retail space is down. I would say that is true probably throughout much of the country. Maybe 15 years ago, retail properties were one of the hottest things, and everybody wanted to buy them for investment properties. And they get higher than average rents, and the leases tend to be longer, and pretty much everybody was looking for those kinds of properties. But since that time, we've had an enormous growth in e-tail. I'm sure most people have heard that term, but if you're not familiar with that term, e-tail is online purchasing. 15 years or so ago, that was still kind of new, and now it's commonplace. And a lot of stores no longer really feel like they need to have a store in a shopping center. Most of their sales goes online, and it's by no means everybody, not at all, but it's a significant enough presence that the demand overall for retail space is less. Office space is another thing. The demand for office space is down. I've talked about that before in other areas. People now, they have much denser use of office space than they used to. The average square footage per individual in an office over the last, say, 20-25 years has decreased from about 400 square feet per individual to about 151 square feet per individual. And then you add on top of that the number of jobs where we maybe export jobs to other areas because our technology allows that now, and people who work from home. There are a number of people that used to be in office areas who can do those same functions at home, and companies are paying people to work at home instead of having to pay for their office space. So the demand for office space is also down. Right now, the demand for industrial space, I would say, is up. And that also sort of follows those same trends. You have to think about the market in general, the demand for that space in general, and there's really not much you can do about that. I mean, that's just the way the market is, and you just have to react to that. But you do have to think about your individual property as well. And so if you're in one of these areas where there is a lot of supply, there's a lot of things available, and the demand is down, well, then you want to be sure that you are positioning yourself in the best possible light for those areas. So this last weekend, I had some clients, and we went and we looked at a number of different properties, and these guys, they're trying to get a deal. They are, and so a number of the properties they selected were things that they needed work, and they're not afraid of that work. At the same time, we went to see these properties, And all three of them that we went to see three this last weekend, they needed a lot of work, and they knew that before they went there. But when they got there, all three of them had like the plaster on the walls falling off. They had big chunks of ceiling which had fallen down. They had all kinds of stuff. Now, my guys were prepared for something that needed a lot of work, and you know, that's one thing. But and one of them didn't have the utilities on. I mean, we went in there, it was a cold day, and it was freezing inside. There was no heat or no air conditioning. There was no electric. So here's the deal with that. And I've had this discussion with my clients. You know, sometimes you'll have a client, and especially if they're sort of in a financial pinch, they want to just shut off the utilities. And number one, that could lead to more damage, which you do not want. I mean, that makes things worse instead of better. But number two, when your client comes through and you're lucky enough to have a showing, and there's no heat or air conditioning, and it's either super hot or super cold, you can tell them all you want. You know, oh, that works. It's just that the landlord turned that off, but they don't know that. They don't, what they have experienced is that, and so in their mind, it's like, how do we know this works? And you might even say, well, if it doesn't work, the landlord promises he'll fix it. But they may not know the landlord, and they may not know how if they can rely on that promise. And so just kind of think about it. Think about yourselves. If you were going and you had two spaces that you were looking at, and one had the utilities on, and it was, you know, had the temperature under control, and it looked, you know, pretty well cleaned up. Maybe it needed work, but at least it was cleaned up, versus one where there's, you know, it's freezing cold in there, and the walls are falling off and the ceilings are falling in. Well, just ask yourself, which one are you going to look at? I mean, you know, it seems so obvious, and yet there are a lot of landlords who, you know, they just kind of say, well, you know, we'll fix that for you, or well, you know, we'll give you a discount for that. I think that my guys might have been okay with some of that if, one, the electricity had been on and they could get around, and they knew that the electricity worked, and they knew that the heating and air conditioning worked, and it had been cleaned up. You know, if the walls needed repair, that might have been fine, but to have all of that plaster just dumped on the floor and the ceilings caving in and just left there, it just does give a bad impression. Some people can get past that. You know, there's no question. You'll have people that can get past that. But I'm here to tell you, most people can't. I have another client right now, and this guy is trying to do everything right. He really is, and he is a good guy, and he is willing to spend some money. And he has gone through, and he spent a lot of money trying to fix old things. But we reached a point where he does not want to throw money away. He wants to do that. So one thing he did is he's put in a completely new elevator. The old elevator had some issues. I mean, it would sometimes get stuck, and I mean, it just wasn't reliable. And so to his credit, he decided that they were just going to put in a new elevator so that would not be a problem. And they did. They put in a new elevator, but there's some electrical work that needs to be done, and it can't pass the inspection until that electrical work has been done. And so even though we have a new elevator, we're not allowed to use it. And so we're waiting on that electrical stuff, and we've been waiting now for like 6 months. Well, guess what? Every time we have someone who comes to the building and wants to see the building, and they see the first floor and we're kind of fine, and then they want to see the other floors, and we can't use the elevator. And so, you know, we tell them, hey, you know, we have a new elevator here. It's just that we're waiting on the final electrical inspection, and once that's done, you know, then it'll be in operation. But these guys can't help but wonder, are we going to have to use the stairs? How are people going to get up and down to our office? You know, what you say it's going to be ready. Well, when is it going to be ready? Why isn't it ready now? And so once again, even though this is a reasonably nice building and the people have really spent a lot of money fixing it up, who do you think they're going to choose if they have two spaces about the same size, about the same price, and they're able to ride the elevator up on one and the other you can't ride the elevator? What would you do? So, you know, some of these things in the interest sometimes of trying to save money or to try to do things a certain way, and I'm not saying that people don't have good intent, but you're shooting yourself in the foot. Some of these sort of basic things, you know, make sure it's clean. If it needs work and you tell people it needs work, that's fine, but don't just leave all this stuff caving in on, you know, all over the place and have this giant mess. I mean, people come in and they see that and you can't help but wonder. Ask yourself this question. It's like, if they're showing me this, I wonder what I don't even know about. I mean, if there are this many problems right now, I wonder what we haven't even, you know, been told about. Or maybe you don't think that they're misleading you, but maybe they don't even know. It's like, if they're having these kinds of problems, maybe there's a bunch more problems that they're not even aware of yet. So those things, don't underestimate those kinds of things. I mean, those can make a really big deal. You know, you would still have some hurdles to overcome if you came in and all the plaster was off the walls. I mean, you would, but you can tell a story about that. You know, I mean, you can say, well, you know, they had a roof leak and it damaged the walls. And so they just went ahead and took that off. And so, you know, you may need to repair that, but that will be kind of up to you. You can put drywall up, or you can put new plaster up, or whatever it might be, but you have a story that you can tell. And it's not maybe as good as having, you know, perfectly, you know, positioned space where everything is in great condition. But if someone's looking for something to fix up, that won't be a surprise to them. And it will help mitigate some of those other doubts. So, you know, those kinds of things are important. You know, have it neat, have it clean, have the HVAC working. If you're trying to save money, that's fine, but keep it, you know, keep the temperature at in the winter 50 or 55 degrees at least. In the summer, you know, maybe 75 or so. 80 is probably too high, but 75 or so. So people know that it works when they come in. Have it at least neat. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it should be neat so that if someone comes in, you know, they're not just, you know, wondering if there's mold everywhere. You know, if there's all the, I mean, what would you do? Just think about that. What would you do? So those things are actually quite important. They're very important. And so those are the things that you can do. Those are the things that you can do. If you're trying to lease your space, you want it to show well. You know, there's some things that you can do. I have had some situations. There's a, it's a little bit like a Photoshop service that I sometimes use, where if you have kind of pretty nice space, but it's just sort of vacant, and you know, sometimes it's a little hard to do that picture, you can do kind of a Photoshop arrangement with some of these companies where they'll Photoshop in furniture and Photoshop in kind of, you know, those kinds of details. They might paint and carpet and things like that. And it lets people see the potential of that space. And that kind of stuff is fine. But if it's just like, you know, everything is just in terrible, terrible condition, that's a lot to overcome. And especially if you're in a very competitive market. If they have lots of other choices, don't be surprised if they choose another choice. You know, I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, you would do the same thing. So anyway, that's kind of my, I guess I'm on my soapbox here. I've had a number of clients over the years that for whatever reason, they just felt like that was a waste of money to try to do that. And their property sat a long, long time. So if you want it to lease, you need to have it presentable. You need to have the basics. People need to know, hey, the mechanicals on this are working. The electric works. The heating and air conditioning works. The plumbing works. Those kinds of things. It needs to be cleaned up, but it's not like falling apart. The roof is not falling in. The walls are not collapsing on us. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but you'd be surprised how often that happens. Like I said, this last weekend, I went to 3 separate listings, and all 3 were that way. All 3. And my guys, they came in and they were ready to kind of make a deal. They wanted to get a good deal on something, but they looked at that and they're like, there's no way. There's no way. I mean, we're looking at this and it's a disaster as it is, and we can't even imagine what other things might be wrong. So don't shoot yourself in the foot. That's sort of the takeaway on this is, it doesn't have to, don't go in and try to finish it like in a Class A condition or something like that. I'm not saying to just, just wildly spend money on the space. But it does need to be neat and clean, and they do need to be able to see that the elevator works, the heating and air conditioning works, all these kinds of things are in good working order so that they have some confidence when they make that decision that that would be a good spot for them. So, well, that's it for tonight. Again, lately I've been getting longer, and I may start bringing a timer with me to make sure that I don't go over, because I'm finding that the more comfortable I get in front of you, the more I tend to really kind of talk maybe a little more than I should. But that's it for tonight. I hope that you found this useful. If you did, I hope you will click like. If you think there's someone else who might benefit from this, I hope you will share it. And of course, if you would like to see more of these in the future, please hit subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you next time. Have a great evening. Take care. Bye.